Also, one thing that's kind of cool about Gallywix is they're doing the Gul'dan thing, where Gul'dan on Heroic had a P1, a P2, and a P3. But then Gul'dan on Mythic was like, you started in Heroic's P2 very briefly, and then you spent like 60% of the rest of the fight in P3. But then it had like a Mythic-Only phase that kind of everyone knew was going to happen, but didn't officially know. Gallywix kind of looks like that. Like Gallywix has like P1, P2, and P3 in Heroic. And then in Mythic, right now the Dungeon Journal is like really unclear, but it basically only has him starting in P3 and the boss is mobile, which could be a majority of the boss, but it like, I think definitely is lending itself towards... Now, there's a lot of data mining involved in... So just a little bit of information. Every Mythic phase that has ever been a Mythic phase, Jailer, N'Zoth, Gul'dan, like anytime there's like a Mythic phase, you don't know what it looks like ahead of time, but you almost always data mine the actual mechanics. So just like every other normal like Mythic end boss, there are a bunch of random Mythic spells that you can't really tell if they are thrown out Mythic spells. Like, for example, when you're preparing for Queen Ansurek or Fyrak, you're tracking, like, these not in the Dungeon Journal data mined spells in Mythic that look really crazy. And, like, 9 out of 10 times, they are just, like, old mechanics they never took out of the journal, or they never took out of the PTR. And, like, they were never intended to be on the fight, and they moved past them, but they're still there. Either to throw you away, or, like, to kind of throw you off as a data miner, or they are just, you know, they just, like, I moved on from that. I'm not going to delete it from the game. I'll leave it in here just in case, whatever. But also, when Mythic phases happen, usually there's more than a few of those mechanics, and you can kind of piece them together to see what they would actually do in the fight, and it kind of makes sense. So I won't really tell you how I feel specifically about Gallywix, but... oh, okay. There's also another wrinkle. So... before Plunderstorm, basically everything that's ever been in the game has been data mined before it's come out. And then Plunderstorm was completely secret and completely undata mineable until it came out, and it was this thing that no one knew about. So that proved that Blizzard actually could work on stuff and hide it at the same time. Now, we've never seen evidence of that on a raid boss, but like, is it possible Blizzard is developing an entire Mythic phase without the mechanics being data mineable? At least until it goes live, they could maybe do that, like on the actual release of the raid. Like, I'm sure it would be there. I think that's how that works. But basically what I'm saying is, I think it's possible that not only does Gallywix have a Mythic phase, I think it's possible that it has like multiple. And I also think that would be cool. I don't know. Imagine you start in P3 of Heroic, but the boss is mobile, and then there's legit like a P2 and a P3 that isn't on Heroic. That's kind of a big jump, but I think they could get away with it for one reason. Like, everyone's talked about Dungeon Journal stuff. They're like, the best version of WoW rating is there's no Dungeon Journal when it comes out, but then like once a boss is killed on Mythic, the Dungeon Journal gets released for that boss. That way on Heroic for the first week, everyone can kind of like figure out the bosses on their own, but also you'd have the opportunity to like look at a video from a top guild killing that boss and get some information if you want it, which is basically the information economy now. But like, I don't think you could do that in Mythic because too many people do early Mythic bosses to where I think Blizzard cares more about. It's not just all about the race world first. They care about everyone in the game. But like, the reality is the end boss in week 1 and 2 is legit just for the race world first, for sure. Like 100% this is designed for us. And then it is just nerfed over time passively and actively. So if they ever were going to do like a P2 and P3 are like fully not in the Dungeon Journal and you have to figure them out, I don't think that would affect the community in any way negatively, because the reality is when you're finally going to pull Mythic Gallywix, there's going to be a kill video from us and Echo and Method and all these other guilds, right? And there's going to be a strat that you figure out how to do, and you having seen the Dungeon Journal before getting to that boss would have not helped you prepare for that strat whatsoever. It would have done nothing. You would have just copied a video like you always do, right? It would only be for the top guilds. Like, it would just kind of make the race world first a little bit more interesting, and I think it would make the like the people watching more involved in like the problem solving process. I think it'd be very, very fun. It would also be like a fucking really stressful doing the race world first, because you know how there's like a little bit of hesitance from both sides right now where like anytime you're doing something where you feel like you're going to give the other team information when they're sleeping, there's some times where you go dark or turn your stream off or don't show exactly what you plan on doing. Bro, can you imagine an end boss where you normally spend like 3 to 4 days on one boss where 70% of it wasn't in the Dungeon Journal? Bro, you'd be like so paranoid. Like, the worst thing you could ever do is like have a really good couple of hours before you sleep and figure out and show a perfectly good strat and the other team just wakes up for it. That would legit be the biggest seesaw race of all time. But it would also be very fucking fun, and I think they should do it. If Mythic was a fully different fight, it could be completely tuned separate from the heroic mechanics for average guilds. I don't really even know what you're talking about. So when they design fights, they don't design them normal and then design up, and they don't design them mythic and design down. They design heroic bosses whenever they're making their first boss, and then they dumb it down for normal and amp it up for mythic. So I don't think any mythic boss being completely different than a heroic boss would actually help you, because the original design intention is to make it a fair and good fight on heroic, which is also why, in my opinion, it's more often than not that the heroic version of the boss is the best version of the boss, right? Like if you're comparing it for what it's actually supposed to do, like Razageth being an amazing heroic boss and a bad mythic boss, right? Denathrius was a great mythic boss, but like it was one of the best heroic bosses of all time, like all time. Because difficulty doesn't necessarily mean quality. Like something being harder doesn't automatically mean that it's good or better. So you basically have to rate everything for what it is. A heroic boss, you're rating it as a heroic boss, not a mythic boss, or else it would be rated differently. But like, I think heroic bosses is what Blizzard does the best. And it's not surprising, because when they make these bosses initially, they are purely made for heroic only, and then they are amplified in other directions. But I think that makes heroic a better difficulty, which is why I think the majority of the raid community, I would love to actually see numbers like this breaking this down, but I think the majority of people who interact with raids do normal at the beginning of a season, and then they work their way through heroic and get AOTC, and then they stop. This is like undercover raid leading type shit. Like you'll see those guilds 2 months, 3 months in that are doing the last boss on heroic, and that's a reasonable challenge for them, and they look forward to that. I think that is the majority of raiders, at least. I think the vast majority of raiders never go into mythic. I mean, I think numbers support that too, but I don't know. I'd agree with that, excluding the LFR community. Oh yeah. I was excluding LFR. Blizzard has stated that LFR is their most participated in raid mode, and that is not surprising whatsoever. But I think it's also like, I honestly consider LFR like different than normal and heroic. Like it isn't, but I consider like normal, heroic, and mythic like a designed thing, and LFR is like, it's like you're reading a short story of the raid while kind of doing it, but it's not really doing it.